So what if I told you that some of the biggest, most fundamental ideas in marketing, the stuff they teach you in business school, the things people build entire careers on, are actually myths? Today, we're going to dig into the hard evidence from Byron Sharp's incredible book, How Brands Grow, to find out what really makes them successful.
Think about it for a second. We're all told you have to be different, right? You need that unique selling proposition to cut through the noise. It feels like the absolute first rule of marketing. And then there's this one, the classic mantra, it's 5 times cheaper to keep a customer than to find a new one. I mean, that single idea is the foundation for countless strategies and budgets. But what if the data tells a totally different story?
Mark Twain really hit the nail on the head here. This whole explainer isn't just about learning new things, it's about unlearning the old stuff that might be holding you back. We're going to challenge these big ideas with some cold, hard facts. Okay, let's get into it. Here's the core concept, and it's so powerful. You can think of marketing as being like architecture. Yeah, it's a creative field for sure, but an architect can't just ignore the laws of physics. You can design the most beautiful building in the world, but if you ignore gravity, well, it's not going to stand for very long. The same is true for building a brand.
So let's start by tackling our first sacred cow, this intense obsession with customer loyalty. We're always told to focus on our superfans, our loyalists. But is that really where growth comes from? To really get this, we have to talk about something called the double jeopardy law. Now, this isn't just a theory, it's a scientific pattern that shows up over and over in basically every category you can imagine. And it says that smaller brands get a double whammy. Not only do they have way fewer buyers, but those buyers are also just a little bit less loyal. Okay, now let's look at the proof. Check out the UK market for washing powder. Persil is the big leader with a 22% market share. Surf is much smaller, down at 8%. Now look at penetration. That's the percentage of households that buy the brand. Huge difference, right? 41% for Persil versus just 17% for Surf. But, and this is the crazy part, look at purchase frequency. That's our measure for loyalty. It's almost identical. Persil buyers purchase 3.9 times a year. Surf buyers 3.4. The massive gap in market share has almost nothing to do with loyalty and everything to do with the number of buyers.
And just in case you think that was a fluke, here's the data for shampoo in the UK. You guessed it, it's the exact same story. Head & Shoulders has over 5 times the market share of Little Vosine. Its penetration is way bigger, 23% to 4%. But their loyalty? Once again, they're practically neighbors. 1.9 purchases a year versus 1.6. It's an undeniable pattern.
So the takeaway here is absolutely critical. If you want to grow your brand, the evidence is overwhelming. The path to growth is getting more people to buy you, period. Even if they only buy you once or twice a year. Trying to squeeze way more loyalty out of your existing customers, well, that's like trying to fight marketing gravity. The real prize is penetration. All right, so that brings us to our next myth, the retention trap. You've all heard it, I've heard it a million times. It's 5 times cheaper to keep a customer than get a new one. That one idea has probably sold more CRM software than anything else on the planet. But is it actually true? Well, here's the thing. When you actually trace that claim back to its source, you find out it's not based on any real-world data. It's a fantasy. It comes from a thought experiment, a bit of math that makes 2 massive and, frankly, completely unrealistic assumptions. Here's where the whole thing just falls apart. First, for that math to work, the idea that a tiny retention boost doubles your profits, you have to assume that making that improvement cost you absolutely nothing, $0. And we all know that's not how the real world works, right? And second, it just assumes you can actually slash your customer defection rate in half. So let's see how possible that is. Take a look at the real-world data for car brands in the UK. Even Ford, the market leader with huge penetration, loses almost a third of its customers every single year. And look at everyone else. They're all clustered around a 40 to 50% defection rate. The idea that any one of these brands could just magically cut that number in half, something none of their competitors have ever managed to do, is, well, it's a fantasy. And the implication here is just huge. The giant pool of people who didn't buy from you last year is a much, much bigger target for growth than the tiny gains you might get from trying to stop customers from leaving. When it comes to growth, acquisition is where the real potential is. It's not even close. Okay, so if growth is all about acquisition, the obvious next question is how do you get all those new buyers? And the classic marketing answer is through differentiation. You have to persuade them that your brand is unique, that it's better. But you can probably guess where this is going. The evidence points in a very different direction.
This quote from the book is just brilliant because it captures the problem so well. For hundreds of years, you had these well-intentioned doctors who practiced things like bloodletting because their theories told them it should work. In marketing, our obsession with differentiation and persuasion can be a lot like that, a popular practice that doesn't actually help and might even be hurting. This table really lays out the mental shift we need to make. We have to move from the old worldview to a new one. So instead of being obsessed with differentiation, we should be focused on distinctiveness. Instead of trying to persuade people, our job is to refresh and build memory structures. We stop worrying about abstract positioning and start focusing on salience, which is just a fancy way of saying being easy to think of when someone is ready to buy.
So what's the real difference here? It sounds subtle, but it's massive. Differentiation is about having a unique message, what you say. Distinctiveness is about having unique assets, what people see. It's your colors, your logo, your tagline, maybe even a jingle. The goal isn't to convince someone you're fundamentally different or better. The goal is just to be the brand that pops into their head and is super easy to spot at that moment of purchase.
And this totally changes the job of advertising. Its main role is not some high-pressure sales pitch. It's much more like simple maintenance. Good ads just remind people you exist, using all those distinctive assets we just talked about. They keep your brand fresh in people's minds, building what scientists call mental availability, basically making you easy to think of. All right, so we have busted some pretty huge myths. We've unlearned that loyalty is the secret sauce, that retention is the cheaper path, and that differentiation is the ultimate goal. So what do we replace all that with? How do brands actually grow? This right here is the new framework. These are the laws of marketing gravity. Growth comes from penetration. That means getting more buyers, especially those light buyers who only pop into the category every once in a while. And you do that by building two things: mental availability, so you're easy to think of, and physical availability, so you're easy to buy. The way you build these is by focusing on being distinctive, not different, and creating advertising that simply reaches people and refreshes their memory of you.
You know, having this knowledge is really empowering. It's a clear, evidence-based roadmap that cuts right through all the noise and all the myths. The laws are there. The only question left is, what are you going to build with them?